I talking about today? Well, I was inspired yesterday. Absolutely inspired yesterday. I went to see a theatrical performance. I went to the theatre for the matinee on a Saturday, and it's one of my things that I do when I have a me day. And I definitely had a me day yesterday. So, we talk about having different types of days. There's me days, there's focus days, and there's stuff days. And I had a me day yesterday, so I went to the theatre. And I went to see a Shakespeare play, Much Ado About Nothing, which you may have seen or you may not have seen, or you might not be a fan of Shakespeare, you are a fan of Shakespeare. And it was brilliant. And the reason why it was brilliant, it was performed by the people at the Crucible Theatre in Sheffield, but also with a theatre company called Ramps on the Moon. Now, you can both look up those two theatres. I'm not here to advertise those, the Crucible or Ramps on the Moon, but the play and the production was an accessible production. And not in the sense that it just made some slight adaptations. You had earphones that you could hear what was going on, or some of the play was done in sign. It was amazing because this company and the theatre had really thought about what they'd done. So there were, headphones you could hear if you needed an audio description of what was happening on the set. There was also captions that were there so you could read what was happening. Some of the actors were signed using British Sign Language. Some of them using spoken English. Some of the actors were neurodiverse and acted and used their strengths with their neurodiversity to express themselves. And it was just superb. And this whole play, a Shakespeare play, which at times is difficult to understand. I don't know if there's any Shakespeare fans watching, but Shakespeare is a little bit difficult. I find with Shakespeare, I have to have 5 or 10 minutes as the play starts to warm up to the language, and then I start to take on the language. But these actors and the cast and the creatives did an amazing job. So I want to just talk a few things to aid communication that I saw in this play. So we'll start off at how it started. Well, how the play started was all the theatrical lights, which are called the house lights in the auditorium, were half the way up. So they weren't fully off and they weren't fully on, which gave a sense of safety and security to some people in the audience who don't like it being really dark. And I thought, wow, that was really interesting. And part of me said, a belief in my head said, oh, the lights should go off. Well, actually, it made no difference whatsoever. And it was even more enjoyable because the lights were on, that I could see other members of the audience reacting to the play and enjoying it as much as I was enjoying it. And I will tell you what happened at the end of the play, just to show you how much the audience enjoyed it. So that was interesting. So the lights half on, half off. Bit of a belief in my head had conquered there. But what happened on stage then was just superb. Every actor, not in Shakespearean verse, but joking about it, came to the front of the auditorium and explained what they were wearing, what their name was, and who would be communicating on their behalf. So, for example, one of the actors, he's a great actor from Sheffield, and he was wearing a blue suit, and he described the suit, described his name, and described a little bit about his personality. And he was using spoken English to communicate. Another actor came on, and she was wearing a white dress, big flowing white dress, and she explained that some of her lines she would be using spoken English, and some of her lines she would be signing using British Sign Language. Another actor came on, and she was talking about that she basically signed to say she would be signing all the time. But another actor would be speaking her lines in spoken English. And I just thought that was just amazing. And then on the it didn't in the play, we were watching the play, you just got used to that. But I think the learning point for me there is that they explained it right from the start. They told us how they were going to tell this amazing Shakespearean story. And they used all sorts of funny lines and gags and things. which was involving disability, which was involving ability and neurodiversity, and it worked superbly well. Superbly well. So, two learnings so far. First, about the beliefs about communication, and secondly, about explaining to people about how you're going to communicate. And that struck me also. Sometimes we don't ask people, do we? How can I communicate? How can I communicate to you in the best possible way so you get the benefit, not I get the benefit? So I'm being very conscious today about where my hands are. Now, if you know me and you've seen me in How to Be Brilliant before, or you've met me, you know I use these all the time. 5 things, and I point and I gesture. I'm trying today not to use my hands all the time. So I'm physically putting my hands in my pocket. And I'm trying to think about the people that are watching me now if my hands get in the way. They might not, they might, but it's just to try something out. So I'm trying not to block the communication. So it struck me watching this play again that how people communicate, asking people how is the best way for them to communicate, not the best way for me. So thinking about how the other person receives the message. And that goes on to my third point about this amazing performance. I sat next to a lady who was a woman next to me, and we were chatting about the play and how she was enjoying it, and she told me she was blind. And she said she really enjoyed the play because she could hear lots of different nuances, and she could hear some music which introduced characters. She heard how the characters were using the props. She heard the intonation in their voice. And I thought, again, isn't that superb? That things that I wouldn't have necessarily thought of, this woman next to me would really praise the way the actors and the directors had thought about enhancing some aspects of communication. So she got the benefits of what everybody else in the audience got. So again, that goes back to really thinking about and really asking people, what's the best way to communicate? Do you communicate in words? Do you communicate in colour, pictures, signs? Do you communicate in your body language? Asking yourself all those ways that you communicate. And we also had a discussion at the end. I said I found it a really sensual, using my senses. At times, sometimes it was a little bit overloading for me. And then I started to think about my own sort of way I connect. And what I realized was I was trying to focus on too much all at the same time. And the lady next to me, the woman next to me, she said, yes, Steve, but you're trying to focus on everything. People in this audience will be focusing on the signer. They'll be focusing on the audio description, which was going along the bottom on some really brilliant screens. Some people will be focusing on the colours and the movement. Some people will be focusing on the way the actors are portraying and using the Shakespearean language. So I learned from that was that you can't focus on it all the time. You just have to enjoy the experience. You just have to really enjoy the experience. So let's just cover some of those points before I end what happened at the end of the play. So the first thing was about recognizing that we have beliefs about the way things are done. Well, I hope, this production by the Sheffield Crucible and Ramps on the Moon will become the way theatrical performances will be done in the future. So they're fully accessible to people that perhaps haven't accessed that medium before. There was a lot of young people, by the way, in the theatre watching the Shakespeare play, which was amazing. Let's think about how you describe and how you set communication up. So before before you start anything, thinking about setting that up before you launch into something. Before we come online and we start talking about productivity tips and we start to talk about things that we're interested in, how about just giving the people who are watching a few moments to settle in by giving them some description? Thinking about how people receive the information rather than how you deliver it. How is the best way to communicate with the people that you are trying to communicate with? And then the fourth point was, don't focus on it all. Just focus on in enjoying it. So, for me, my focus yesterday was to enjoy this amazing production, and it was just superb. And then the last thing I want to talk about, and if you notice, I have talked about 5 things, but I'm not going to do the old, well, there we go, 5 things. Couldn't resist. The last thing for me was appreciation. Now, at the end of this performance, the audience showed its appreciation in many, many different ways. So, you go to a play and you know what the convention is, isn't it? The convention is that we all politely clap, especially in Britain. We all politely clap. Well, in this performance, the audience did a number of things. They clapped, they cheered, they signed to the audience. They signed to the audience and to the cast and the crew using British Sign Language rather than clapping. So they did this, which is the sign for clapping. So if you think about it, if you can't necessarily hear clapping, you can see this, and this is the sign for applause. Also, this is the sign for party, which I love. That's a sign for party, but this is applause. So the audience were doing this as well. People were cheering. People were clicking, using their fingers to click. Some audience members stood up. Some audience members used the aids that they had. So the woman next to me had a white stick which she used, and she was banging it on the chair. And then one of the most meaningful things for me was a young man who, it was his first time in the theatre, and he had something called cochlear implants, which are implants in the side of the head connected to the inner ear, and it allows people to hear. He, for the first time, had seen and heard and taken part in his first ever Shakespearean play, and thoroughly enjoyed it. And for me, if tip number 5 is anything to do with communication, is saying how much you appreciate someone and how much you appreciate the effort that they've taken, because sometimes people don't know. So how much you appreciate the way they thought about you, how much you appreciate the way they communicated, and how much you appreciated all the things that you do to help others. So this week, folks, can I ask you a favor? Can I ask you a favor for this week? Can I ask you to think about how you communicate to others, and also think about how you make experience accessible for all, so we all can enjoy something like a Shakespearean play. Think about how you can make it accessible for others and how you communicate.